All right, I think we are live. Welcome everyone to another Matt Maran Motoring live stream here on the Matt Maran Motoring YouTube channel. Hope you're all having a great week so far. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late here. I was having issues with posting to Instagram. It was being weird for me, so got it working. But sorry, I'm a few minutes late. But thanks so much for stopping by, everyone. Like all the other usual midweek live streams, we're going to go for an hour. I give priority answering to anyone who's a member there, the green usernames, and anyone else does super chat, super thanks, always get the priority answering as well. There's a link if you're interested. And I see we have Stephen and Danny. Danny's got a lot of stuff to say here tonight here. So Stephen, Danny, Vishal, Mr. 705, Raphael, Jordan, Chad, and Jerry, and Will. Thanks so much, everyone. And um, chat says the chat is rent acceptant. So we'll get through that, but then we do want to make sure we answer everyone's questions too here. So Steven says, hi Matt, so my dad has updated his EV shopping list to a couple of cars, including the EV6 and the Nissan Leaf and Toyota BZ and possibly even the Ford Mach-E. And we remeasured the garage. Turns out we can get close to being able to fit something that is like 185 inches of length in my dad's side of the garage. I don't recall the length off the top of my head for what everything is, but yeah, I mean, definitely test drive them all, see what he thinks, and hopefully he finds one that he likes. But best of luck with him with the shopping here. And hopefully he can still get a good deal, even though, all the tax credits have expired and all the deals seem to have kind of simmered down a little bit. Hopefully he can still get a good deal there. And Danny says, hello, haven't been able to drive yet. Me and my brother got into a bit of a road rage incident with our grandma yesterday. Rear spot was a 98 or 99 Mitsubishi Montero Sport. Very nice. He says, about the road rage, my grandma was driving me and my brother home from her house in her own Accord. When we get to a red light, we're turning right, but our turn lane doesn't have a light. We instead have a yield sign. When this Malibu, 2 cars behind us, started laying on the horn because we're not going, my grandma was like, you want me to fly out in 40 mile per hour traffic and die? We get out on the road, and then the Malibu goes into the right lane, whips around her and brake checks to a near dead stop. He starts waving back and forth, and then my grandma decided to give him a piece of his own medicine and lays on her horn. Hit the horn so hard you could hear her hand connect with the horn. He then gets even more pissed. He just turns left, cutting off a minivan. We're turning onto the same street, and he's tailgating an older Malibu in front of him. He stops in the middle of the street and nearly slams head on into a school bus. My grandma is like, oh, you're a real good one. Sorry for going on such a rant. This just shows how impatient and oversensitive some people are. The Malibu driver hit the brakes so hard, I heard his ABS kick in because his tires started to screech a little. Crazy. Yeah, people just are at their wits' end in many cases, and yeah, you just try and steer clear as best you can. But some people, there's no saving them. They're just want to want to go nuts. You let them go off and give them a wide berth. But sorry to hear about that. And Vishal says, just finished the junkyard video from yesterday. Interesting mods in it. Yeah, I mean, there was some really good stuff, even though that one was a little bit shorter than the other ones I've done. So there wasn't quite as many, but there is still some really solid stuff. It's so amazing, the wild mods that come in. I really thought it wouldn't be this common. Like, I thought it'd be kind of a lot more rare, and I'd be scrounging for, viral clips. I mean, not like it's viral, but, like interesting clips. And man, yeah, if you watch that one this week, it is, just makes for really good content, thankfully, which is why, again, I'm very optimistic for the future of those videos. But it's funny. He says, in a previous one, you came across a Genesis Coupe with the brown seats. Throwback, because I remember Saab Kyle bought one new in 2010. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I didn't remember he bought it new. I knew he had one at one point, but that's cool. Yeah, did he have the brown interior? I don't know, but that was a rare one. I hope someone saved that interior, because I'm hoping it's valuable, or it's got to be rare at the very least. But I'm glad you watched the video, Michelle. Thanks for watching it, and glad you enjoyed it. And Mr. 705, thanks for stopping by, and Raphael. And Jordan says, hello, fellow Matt heads. And Chad says, an older right-hand drive Toyota came through my job. My crew ran to find me. It said something like Soarer on the back. I've never seen or heard of it before. That's cool. Yeah, the Soarer, Um, I think it is kind of on the same basis as the Lexus GS, and I think Soar I think there's some crossover there. I think like the early GSs of the 90s, the GS 350 here in the States, I believe was a Soarer. Now, if this is a right-hand drive car you're looking at, then it was actually a real one that was imported in, but I think you can kind of convert GSs into Soarers here if you want. I think I have the right car. I think that's just from my foggy recollection. I could be off on that. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, so that's kind of what it is. Really cool cars, and I mean, I think there was one in Tokyo Drift, right? That had some nice drifting going on, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've even watched Tokyo Drift, but yeah, it's an awesome spot though. I don't think I've ever seen actually one of those on the streets in person. So that's a very nice spot, Chad. And let me see. So Chad says, I loved your latest episode. The bat car was really awesome. Yeah, that was impressive. The dedication that someone put into doing that. And yeah, I I have so many questions that I'll never have answered as far as that car. And yeah, it was fun. And everything automotive ETA says the Hyundai Equus is a steal of a car at the moment. Modern, large luxury sedan with executive rear seating, rear entertainment system, modern 5-liter V8, around 50,000 miles is 16 to 17 grand. Yeah, all of those are fantastic. I mean, even the Hyundai Genesis sedan, the Genesis G80 even is, depreciated pretty nice and low at this point. And they're pretty solid cars. My buddy has a 2015 Genesis sedan with a V8 and rear-wheel drive, and I don't think he's had any big issues with it. He's had it since new, and he does his maintenances on time and everything like that. But so I mean, anecdotal evidence, but it seems like they're really solid too, from my consensus of them at least. And so, yeah, I mean, Equus is great. All those are fantastic. Kia K900, it's another one. Even the newest generation, like the 2019s, you can pick up one of those. I talked about this in one of my reviews here just recently, but you can pick up one of those for dirt cheap as well. It was actually in the Q70L review when I was talking about some of the competitors, but yeah, K900, super cheap. And I mean, even that, Infinity I just reviewed, another one, that thing was like 18,500 or whatever. Tons of luxury for very little money. And especially when you go for the, Asian stuff, I feel like, you don't have to worry quite as much as you do with some of the German stuff. So, yeah, I think they're all fantastic buys. And even some of the American stuff like Cadillac CT6, those are all under 20 grand now for, the less exciting motors and stuff, but still really nice luxury car with great balance, great handling. There's so many I could go on for an hour about all the cool stuff in that segment. And I've reviewed a lot of them too in the past 10 years, and they were great new too, but especially now at these dirt cheap prices. Yeah, great deals for sure. And Vishal says the Batman Cadillac was the winner. Yeah, absolutely was. And Chad says the shag roof Mustang was kind of crazy. I wonder if it started falling off in the driver's face and that caused the crash. Maybe that's possible. Yeah, that was another one. It's like, man, the work that went into that. And I mean, they hand stitched on to cardboard or whatever. And then I don't know how they must have had some real impressive adhesive to hang that. And then have the wind resistance of, having the windows down, having it not fall down. Yeah, I've never even seen that. I mean, I even watched Pimp My Ride like religiously as a teenager, and I've never seen something like that. Even on that, you'd think they would have certainly done it if someone would have, and yeah, I never have seen that before. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun finding all these crazy things in the yard. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it too. And Vishal says that Saab's was a white 3.8 Grand Touring with the brown seats. Okay, he did buy it new. He has a video of him going to pick it up with his dad. I still watch that once in a while, and it's crazy how much time flies. That's funny. Very cool. Yeah, I'll have to dig that video up sometime and watch it too. That'd probably be fun to see. But that's awesome. Thanks for letting me know, Vishal. And ETA says the glass roof Mustang was a really cool thing. Yeah, that was rare too. I think. When did they offer that? Was that just 20? 2011, 2012, something like that. I can't remember the years, but it was a very narrow window there, and people were begging to have them bring it back, and they never did. Um, Maybe someday we'll see if Ford ever stops being lazy with the Mustang and it does something more with it. Anyway, Fook says, I saw a new Mini Cooper S today. This may be the third time I've seen one. Are they popular in your area? Yeah, actually, they're more popular than I was expecting in my area. The first time I saw one, I was like, "Oh wow, there's one." And then I feel like I see a few every week around here. Which again, I mean, I don't know, maybe people are getting really good deals on them or something, but I mean, a little car like that that's 40 grand or whatever, it's a limited amount of people that are interested in that, I'm sure, but I see a lot of minis, the new generation. I see more of the new generation than I do of the old generation, I think. Um, certainly more than I see of R56, but even the F56 or whatever it's called. I see more of the new ones, I think. Yeah, people really seem to like them, at least around here. That's interesting that it's more rare in your area. I'm not sure why that would be, especially, yeah, I can't remember where you said you were, Fook, but yeah, I don't know. They're hitting Pittsburgh. We have a dealer. We have Mini of Pittsburgh, the only dealer in Pittsburgh, but we do have one at least, which I think is more than a lot of other places can say. So maybe that helps a little bit. And Vishal says Equises are rare to see on the road too. Someone in my neighborhood has one, so I see one every day at least. Nice. I see them. I see a couple. Honestly, what I've been seeing more of is Genesis G90s. I've strangely been seeing a few a month now after like not seeing a G90 at all for a long time. And again, I think some of it's, people are buying them from other places where maybe they've been sitting or whatever and getting them for these dirt cheap prices. And now they're starting to pop up in more heavily populated places or something. I don't know, but I've seen a decent amount of G90s. I actually saw a new G90 yesterday. And I was like, hey, look, someone bought a new G90. I feel like hardly anyone does. So I'm glad someone did, because it seems like a very impressive car. But yeah, that's cool. And let me see. Chad says, I actually thought the RCPT Cruiser was cool. Not my style, but I could see it on some hippie farm or pumpkin patch. Yeah, I mean, again, all these things take a lot of work and a lot of time. And say what you will about the owner's taste in mods, but like, I gotta respect the work that went into it and the time that went into it. Maybe some people have too much time on their hands, and that's how some of this stuff happens. But they did the work, and instead of sitting around and watching TV, they went out and rattle canned their car with stencils or whatever, and so you got to respect it. And Jordan says, he asked Chad, what if car companies had their own junkyards? He said they would never, because they want consumers to buy OEM parts new. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely there's a lot of money to be made in the OEM parts, new kind of stuff. So yeah, and yeah, there's, like the pull apart yards and stuff, obviously, they're profitable businesses, but, it's not like there's some gigantic corporation that's, making billions of dollars a year or anything. So yeah, I think it's probably a fairly limited amount that you can make, because the thing is, like, they buy these cars, but like they have no idea who's going to pull what, or is anyone going to pull anything. I mean, there's some very complete cars that still get sent to the crusher. I mean, I think I've noticed here out on the yards, even though I give it about 2 months before I go back to that same yard. I noticed this both in Pittsburgh and my second go around here of the Akron, Ohio yard, that there are some things that linger, and I wonder if they just don't think it's been picked through enough yet, like the Equus that was in Akron. I'm guessing they're hoping more people pick more stuff before they crush stuff, but I'm not sure how they decide on what gets crushed when. But but it's a complete gamble, because they could buy a car. I mean, I'm sure they have data on which things are the best buys, but like typically they'll give you cash for basically anything. So they'll take a risk on it, get it out of your driveway or your yard or whatever, put it in the yard and see what happens. But I'm sure there's some cars where they maybe don't make all their money back, or they're not quite as profitable as they need to be. I'm not sure what it costs, or how much money you make just by crushing them and selling the raw materials. But I mean, the parts aren't that expensive, so it is kind of probably not a gigantic margin. But again, I have no idea about the nuts and bolts of the financial side of it, so I don't know. But I think if there was an opportunity to make enough money to make it worth the OEM's while, they probably would. But I just I don't think they're really interested in doing that, because you're right, selling parts is definitely something they'd rather do instead, selling them new. And Jordan, I thank you so much for a super chat as well. He says, haven't seen any commercials for ID Buzz. Yeah, whenever it launched last year, they did like an SNL collaboration, I think, with Kristen Wiig and was it Fred Armisen, I think is his name. And they did a fun little bit in the ID Buzz, and it was an actual commercial thing. I saw the commercial, I think it was on YouTube. If you search like ID Buzz commercial, you'll see that commercial, and I think there's some other spin-offs and variations of that. So I mean, they did do some, and I feel like I recall seeing it during football games and stuff, but it was pretty short-lived. And I think once they kind of sensed the headwind they were facing with it, they just kind of maybe gave up on marketing it a little bit. But I don't know. I'm sad that it's not doing as well as it's kind of a niche product for sure, but I kind of was hoping that more people would get them. It doesn't even seem like the tax credit frenzy really helped much, because the same like 2 or 3 at my local Volkswagen dealer have been sitting there like most of the year. And I thought, okay, well, someone's going to grab them, before the end of the tax credit, and they're still sitting there. So even those, lease deals and stuff weren't enough to get these ones moved in Pittsburgh, which is, a blue city, a place that's very friendly to EVs. We have plenty of chargers, all that. And it still didn't do super well. So it sucks, because I love it. It's actually very well done. I would have totally, if we could have fit it in our garage, I would have really tried hard to talk Beth into it. Probably wouldn't have worked. But if it were, me, and all I was worried about was my own feelings and thoughts and needs and wants, that would be a pretty rad, family vehicle in my mind. But you just, they are very tall. So I think the garageability might actually be part of what hurts them, because you can fit a regular minivan in, like our garage, but the ID Buzz would not fit. So there's some of that's feeding into it too. I don't know. I mean, if you have a modern garage, you're probably fine, but we have kind of a little bit of an older house, so the garage isn't huge. So there's probably some of that maybe holds some people back, because we do have a lot of like fairly old houses here in Pittsburgh. So maybe there's some of that. I don't know, but I hope that they do okay, and they keep investing in it and keep improving it, and keep it around. We'll see. But let me see here. And thank you again, Jordan, for the super chat. So Fuchs says, now with the tax credit gone, do you think dealers are willing to let them go at a loss, since they can't move those units? So I mean, and that applies even to ID Buzz or any of these others. I mean, it depends. I think it really depends on the area that you're in and all that. Because I mean, that was like the whole leverage I had with the Fiat whenever I was negotiating that back in February, even with the tax credit. And a lot of the dealers near me, I mean, PA dealers typically are just not great anyway. It's really sucky that I don't know what it is about PA. Cochrane, the group that I work with, they're like one of the few decent ones, and that's why we went to them for the Lyric. But unfortunately, they don't have a Fiat franchise. Otherwise, it would have made my life a lot easier back in February. But like with that, like this dealer that sold it to me in Kentucky, they were willing to let it go at a loss, because they don't like EVs, generally speaking, in Kentucky. So like, it was more of a scourge on their lot than, like the local dealer 30 minutes away from me that had like 5 or 6 of them just rotting on the lot for like a year. And they tried to compete to an extent, but then they reached a floor a lot quicker than a lot of the other dealers did. And they just, weren't motivated. So it comes down to the dealer really, and how the management feels. There's some of these, even if you're talking about same area, but you have two different dealers. One could just have an owner that just hates EVs or whatever, and just, has to take a few of them just to check the box or whatever. And then they just want to dump them as fast as they can. Others might be super into EVs. And like Cochrane, for example, the dealer that again we got the Lyric from, like they've invested all the money to like put the fast chargers there that people that aren't even customers can just come and use. And they have still really good lease deals even after the tax credits. I'm kind of surprised. I mean, we got a slightly better deal, but you can still go to Cochrane now and like lease one of the electric Cadillacs for pretty similar money to what we got. And so um so like with them, like I think they're still trying the same mindset of like, okay, let's keep the volume up. And if we keep the volume up, then we can, discount these more, but we're making it up in volume versus, trying to squeeze every last penny out of two sales or something. And that was the thing, even whenever I got, we got the Mach E, 3.5 years ago from Ohio. I talked to the owner of that dealership, whenever we went to go pick up the car. He's the nicest guy, and he's just like, this was back when there was 5 or 10 grand markups on all Mach-E's basically everywhere, and we got ours at MSRP, which is such a wild turn of events compared to these days. But like, he's like, we don't need to do markups because he's like, we sell way more volume. He's like, Ford's happier with us as a result. So we get better allocations for all the really good stuff we actually want. And like, we're not screwing people. So it's like a win-win. And I'm like, this is a very basic thing. Like, why, don't other dealers do this? He's like, I don't know. But he's like, it works for us. And I'm very happy it does because, it's everyone wins. And, but every dealer is different. And I think this goes back to, why so many car companies would love to just get rid of dealers altogether, because having that middleman, you're at the mercy of, is it one that's going to support what the OEM is supporting and believes in the same stuff that, the OEM believes in, or is it just a dealer that's dragging their feet and doesn't want to comply with what the, manufacturer wants to do, or, gives people bad taste in their mouths for that brand. Prime example, the markups we still see on some Hondas these days. You see markups on it, basically every new Toyota that's desirable, and long wait lists and stuff like that hurts the brand. There's so many people that, were interested in GR Corolla, and then they saw markups, way back when they had markups. They don't anymore, PSA. But, there are so many people like, nah, forget it. I'm not paying, markup on this car. It was interesting at 40 grand. It's not interesting at 50 or 60. And, I mean, I think like GR Corolla could have sold way more. Get your drinks out, everyone. I think it could have sold way more if you didn't have, the dealer greed. And, I mean, that again affects lots of brands, but I think that's why, the car companies only can do so much. And then it really comes down to how well will this sell, if you have the dealers that support it. Obviously the car companies can give incentives and give some cash on the hood themselves, but it really comes down to how motivated is that dealer to sell. How do they market them well? And there's just a lot that goes into it, to make them successful. But yeah, it's it's a whole circus. Let me see, but I mean, the bottom line though, Fook, the very long answer to your question, but I think you will see some dealers that kind of give up and say, okay, well, we weren't able to move them with the incentives. Now we got to take it on ourselves. But I think most dealers really desperately tried to avoid that because they knew that was going to be what they'd have to do if they didn't get it, gone before the end of the tax credit. So I think, most people probably bent over backwards to get them out the door by September 30th, and then they didn't have to worry about that, hopefully. Now the new ones coming in, I think they'll probably sit on those for a while and just try their luck, probably. And Nicholas says, hi, Matt. We got our first new car dealer in town, a Chevy dealer. Well, that's awesome. Congrats. He says, pretty exciting. We have a Toyota and a Honda dealer, but they only sell used and do maintenance, if you can believe it. Wow, that's crazy. You must live in a really small town. That's nuts. But happy you got a Chevy dealer now. And yeah, that's cool. Hopefully it's a good one. And ETA says the Q70L is really cool with the 5.6 and looks way better than an Equus or K900 or even the earlier Genesis, but doesn't have the rear luxury despite the L. Also, the 5.6 Q70s are pretty high. M56 is cheaper. Yeah, and the M56 is great too. But yeah, I mean, the Q70L though, I mean, you don't have, I guess, the amenities, but I mean, the space, it's hard to beat the space in the Q70L. I mean, it is huge. I can't imagine anyone getting into a Q70L and saying, you know what, this isn't enough space. Like it is, it's really a lot of space. I mean, you get heated seats back there, and I mean, I guess what are you missing that the Q70 doesn't have in the back? I guess you don't have your own climate control, right? So that's something. But I guess that maybe you don't have like the sunshades. I'm trying to think of other executive rear seat features and stuff that's 5 or more years old. I guess some of them had TV screens, but they're probably going to be trashed by this point, so you're better off just having an iPad holder or something if you're going to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think the Q70 is really that deficient in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, that's the great thing with all these options. There's a bunch of them out there for everyone, and it's very nice that there's so many of these great bargains in a car world where there's very few bargains these days. And Danny says, random car fact of the night from me: the most rare GM special editions from the 90s were the 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Cala Wyoming Centennial Edition. The Olds was built to celebrate Wyoming's 100th anniversary of joining the Union. That's crazy. I don't know why they felt the need to celebrate Wyoming's anniversary. I mean, they even in the height of the Cutlass prime, I mean, they couldn't have sold that many in Wyoming, but it's a fun fact. Thanks for sharing, Danny. And ETA says also that the glass roof is in the older S197s. Okay, because I know it wasn't in like the first few years, but maybe was it in the 09, like, or the 2010 refresh? Maybe is that when it started in? But yeah, it was fun. I know back when I was on the Mustang Bullet pages and forums, back when I was following that whole group, there were some people that really wanted a glass roof, and just Ford being Ford, didn't do anything. I mean, even people were like, I wish I could get like a moonroof, because I believe you can get that in Camaro and actually in Challenger for a while there, and Ford just no interest. They just say Cooper convertible, that's all you got. Vishal says the electric minis are surprisingly popular in my area. Actually, people must have gotten killer lease deals on them. Yeah, they were very good lease deals. Not as good as the Fiat deals, in my opinion. I think I recall the best deal I think I saw on the Mini SC, which was the last generation. I think they were going for like $300 a month or something, which again, in the height of the EV craze, was actually quite good. And if there had been better deals on them, I would have considered that instead of the 500e. But I just, by the time I got around to, shopping for the 500e, there was really no old SEs left to lease. I think there was one or two that were like former loaners, and I tried to get a mini dealer to like lease it to me. And they're like, oh, we can't actually do that or whatever. I don't know. They were just being weird about it. I'm like, all right, fine. But yeah, they are really pretty cheap on the used market. Like you can get the SE that's like a few years newer for the same price as a few years older, regular Cooper S or something like that, which is also a great, fantastic bargain and a great buy on the used market too, especially with an extended warranty. But they're pretty solid, reliable cars for this, last generation of the Mini. So I wouldn't be as worried about it as I would be with my old R56 or even the R53s. But yeah, so there must be some good leases. I actually see a fair amount of them in my area too, the Cooper SE, and it's impressive because that's a car that, I mean, I reviewed it when it was new. They launched them in 2020, and it was, it's what, like 110 miles of range. Like it's limiting, but I mean, still for most people, they don't commute that much every day, so it works. And yeah, the price is right. It's cool to see people actually getting them. And let me see here. Chad says, I've seen a few posts about the GM EV1. Apparently, some universities were gifted them and kept them. So there's still a few hanging around. That's cool. And Danny says also about the Cutlass underneath. It was a base model Cala with the 110 horsepower Iron Duke with a 5-speed manual. Wow, 5-speed manual. That's interesting that they didn't just put the automatics in those. That's crazy. And let me see. ETA says the Equus does have road presence. Kind of reminds me of an old Mercedes large four-door from the early 90s. Yeah, it definitely does have presence. It's a big car. They are definitely some pretty prestigious kind of looks on the road there. And Jordan, sorry I missed your other super chat there. He says, companies accept consumer ideas and feedback via email. Different companies do it differently. You can always reach out on like social media to them. Some even have like I think GM and Ford actually have a like report a bug or submit feedback thing on the infotainment screen where you can press into it and just speak out, your feelings if you're frustrated with your car in the moment, and you can actually do that. I know our Mach-E had that feature. I never used it, but you could like complain about stuff live in the car if you want. So there's all kinds of ways you can do it. I guess, email. I mean, even like some people still send letters. I think all those means of communication are still open. How much does it actually get read? I don't know. I think that your better chances are online and on social media. And even like, like in the YouTube comments of like my videos and others, car companies do peruse that stuff from time to time. And if nothing else, they aggregate it and kind of get a sense of overall sentiment for this car, and they can have AI and other things kind of consolidate and say, okay, we had about 56% positive comments and, 40 whatever percent of 44% negative, and you can do things like that. So even if it's not your specific thing being heard, they do kind of get a read on those things. I mean, prime example, I was just at this Dodge Charger 6-pack drive this week. Stay tuned for my review of that on Friday morning. But like, and they've said this many times, like, we heard the feedback. People were mad that, they couldn't get a gas version of the Charger. And, we listened and, we brought in, the gas version. And, obviously that was an outcry of, anger and just people losing their minds. So, I mean, that was very easy for them to get that feedback. But, but companies do, pay attention to this stuff. I mean, all companies do this. I mean, all companies have dedicated social media manager people who their job is to, monitor Facebook posts and monitor complaints on, every social media platform and make sure that the brand's image isn't, being dragged down too much, and, dealing with people's complaints and trying to pacify that stuff if they can. And some are very active. Like I know even with the Mach-E, on the Mach-E forums, like Ford Motor Company has an account and you can tag them. And, there's been some things where there's been people have, come up with issues and said, oh, there's a bunch of us that are having this new issue with the software update or whatever. And, the Ford person will come in and say, okay, well, we're going to, generate an update for this, or they, some things even could lead to recalls, all that kind of stuff. You can actually tag them and they'll look into that kind of stuff. So there's, that's definitely something that car companies try and do. I mean, the level of success of those things is, varies wildly, but they do make an attempt at doing all that. And that goes for any company, whether you're talking car companies or any company. They usually have, as long as they're big enough, they have someone like that that's, or multiple people or teams that are, managing the image of that brand, and, consumer outreach and feedback is certainly, a huge part of that. And let me see here. So Jordan says today someone else bought the 96 Lincoln Mark 8 that we were eyeing. Kind of glad we both agree, even though it was a low mileage and beautiful condition, it was still $11,000 and 30 years old. Yeah, I can understand that. Well, hopefully something else comes around that catches your eye, and it's maybe a fun toy in the future here. But yeah, all good. Thanks for the update there, Jordan, on that. And Danny says Volkswagen actually has its own graveyard. I think in the middle of Utah, there's two parking lots full of Volkswagens that were bought back from Dieselgate. Do they still have those cars? I thought that they were in the process, or were just processing them, recycling them, crushing them, whatever. Because I mean, I'm sure they don't want to just let them rot out there, especially as a reminder of Dieselgate. I'm sure they'd love to, speaking of public sentiment and stuff, I'm sure they'd love to purge any recollection of Dieselgate as best they can. So yeah, I'm curious if that's still actually full of Volkswagens, and because I just had assumed that, after they settled everything, they just ended up crushing them all, but maybe not. And Chad says, I'd still love to see a Christmas tree or Christmas light junkyard walkthrough. We'll see if Pull Apart ever does that. That'd be cool. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But usually things like that take time, so it'll probably be maybe next year, because we're rapidly approaching, I guess in some people's minds, we're already in the holiday season here. So probably maybe next year, we'll see. And Jordan, thank you so much for another super chat. He says, the big three collectively pushed an agenda for SUVs and trucks in the US, accent sedan and hatchback. Do they create a car era mindset for consumers? So I don't know if they pushed an agenda really. With all of the conversations I've had with so many product planners, so many executives for, all the brands that I work with, which is not everyone, but, a lot of them, they're always just looking at the market, and they're following demand, they're following trends. And they can't react super well to micro adjustments in culture and things like that. They're working on stuff for 2030. That's what, I was just talking to Dodge, last night at dinner, and I mean, like, that's what they're saying. Like, we're working on stuff for 2030 now. Like, obviously they're working on stuff in the meantime too. And, there's, again, different stages for all that stuff, different people and different teams that are working on the stuff for 2025, and people that are, managing the stuff that's coming up sooner here for the next couple of years. And then you have the, big picture people that are trying to figure out, okay, well, where are things headed in 5 years? And it's really hard. And this is why, again, car companies do not and cannot, design cars perfectly suited for that exact moment in time, or that exact administration, and what their policy standards are going to be, or whatever the case is. Like, it's impossible. I mean, we're, chatting about, these absurd ideas that we heard in Washington about, oh, just build a factory. It's like, you don't just throw a car factory up in a year. It's literally impossible. And hilarious to even think that would be a thing. Like, it's not like we're building mobile homes here. Like, we're this is, a gigantic, footprint. So I think that, car companies, again, they look at the trends. They also listen to their consumer feedback, and and then they also just have their idea for where they want things to go, and they combine all that stuff and then come up with, okay, what is the best path forward? And if the best path forward is small cars, then they would absolutely do it. I mean, there is even, like Jim Farley, one of the better quotes from him in the past year here is, he was like, people need to fall out of love with giant trucks, because he's like, in order for EVs to make economic sense from a car company standpoint, as far as building them, is like, these gigantic battery packs, it's going to take way longer to reach cost parity when you're talking about a huge pack, versus he's like, with smaller cars, we can do smaller battery packs, and then that gets that cost parity with gas a lot quicker. And obviously, I mean, Ford is the biggest purveyor of trucks in America, so they're kind of part of the problem as well, but they're also not going to cut off the biggest cash cow they have. So they're kind of like, between a rock and a hard place there. But like, even in front of like recognizing like, hey, like, I wish people would buy less trucks in a way. I mean, he didn't say that, but like, if there was interest in sedans, I think that, they would go for it, especially nowadays. I still think it's bizarre we don't have Fusion and stuff. So, it's a little bit of a mixed message, I think. But, I think that, like, that to me expressed that Jim Farley has an interest in trying to get more people into smaller cars, just for their own business sake, if nothing else. But so I don't think there's any agenda to push big vehicles or anything like that. Because I mean, I guess to me, there's nothing to really be gained by that. You could argue, like, maybe gas companies have that kind of an incentive to, the more gas guzzlers they can convince people to buy, the better and stuff. But I don't really see any way for car companies to actually benefit off of that. And before Cafe went away, they actually, I mean, there's different classifications for different things, but for Cafe, it would have made it easier for them if if people were buying the small stuff, because then they would have had a better fleet average and they would have had less pressure and less fines. Same thing for Dodge. If everyone went and bought, Hornets in the past couple of years, it would have been way easier for Dodge from a fine standpoint versus what did everyone want? The V8 Durangos, the V8, Rams, the Chargers, the Challengers. And then it's like, well, now we got to buy hundreds of millions of dollars in credits off of Tesla because, we're so underwater with our, fleet average and stuff. So, in that case, like, it was worse for car companies. But they follow the market. They're like, well, we're still ahead financially if we're paying out the fines, but we're giving people what they want. And I mean, we kind of saw a live example of what happens whenever you try to give people what they don't want, but what is actually beneficial for them. For, Stellantis with Charger EV, which, ended up not being a very good success and failing in I think many people's minds. And that's an example of not following demand, really hoping the demand will generate itself and people will follow your lead. And, clearly for Dodge fans, that was a bridge too far right now. And so, I think that reinforces to them, like, we can't go out on a limb. We can't try and innovate before people are ready. And, and I was talking to them, at dinner the past couple of nights, and, they're like, this is the beauty of the multi-platform setup that we have with Charger and with the other stuff too. They're like, we can flex easier with the demands of the current year that we find ourselves in. They're like, right now people want gas. So, we're doing, the gas, and we have that. It's just kind of like the Toyota model of you have something for everyone. And you still have the electric for people that are into that. You have the gas for people that are into that. And they're like, if all of a sudden next year everyone wants EVs again, great. Well, we'll ramp up demand of the EV version and we'll slow down production of the gas one, or vice versa. They can flex that perfectly. And so once you have all those products out there, then their bets are hedged, which I think is what you're going to see from a lot of car companies going forward. Is before they had stability they could count on. Now they have no stability. They don't have any clarity with policy. They don't know what's happening. They don't know what's going on with tariffs. So they have to hedge all of their bets. And the best way to hedge your bet with vehicles, when you're talking about emissions regulations or lack thereof, is to offer everything. It's expensive, but it probably burns you less in the end if you say, okay, we have the EV version ready to go at a moment's notice. We have the gas version ready to go at a moment's notice. And then, you can just, give people what they want. And I think, again, Toyota pioneered this. And I said this back when the RAV4 Prime came out in 2020 or whatever. I'm like, this is brilliant. Like, meet people where they are in every, way, and try and innovate, where you can, but get people into the electrification that is comfortable for them at the moment. And even, going to a regular hybrid is still a really nice improvement over a non-hybrid. And we're still moving in the right direction as far as reducing emissions. So I think instead of being greedy and trying to be like, oh, let's just go to the extreme of EVs, it's like, look, let's take what we can get from people. And if all we can get is, convincing someone, okay, I guess I'll go for hybrid because I want the new RAV4 or whatever, that's a win still. And I think that's a more pragmatic approach. And I think everyone's coming around to that. And I think you're going to see a lot of companies do that same thing. But I don't think there's any kind of grand agenda or anything like that. I certainly have never gotten the sense that there's anything like that with, again, all the insiders and stuff that I've talked to. And let me see here, but interesting conversation, Jordan. Thanks for bringing that up. And again, apologies for the little tangent here, but let me see. Um, Fook didn't realize how big the ID Buzz was. Yeah, it is. It's very tall, which makes it a fantastic minivan. I mean, you can stand up in that thing. It's very easy. It's easier to get in and out of it than any other minivan. You have more space than any other minivan. I mean, they did it really well, which is part of why it sucks that it's failing so bad. Because like, it's not like it just was poorly made or poorly engineered. Like they actually did a really good job with it, and they're not getting rewarded for that, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it's expensive, and I can't blame people for that. But hopefully they can bring the price down someday. And Linda, thanks for stopping by. Hope you're doing well. And Shane says, I'm jonesing for a Forester or Crosstrek Wilderness, but need to save up some more money. Well, best of luck with the saving. And I will be doing more videos, not Crosstrek Wilderness, because I already covered that and spent a week with that, I believe a year or two ago. But I will be spending a week. I have both the Forester Wilderness and the new one, and then the Crosstrek Hybrid, both scheduled here for December. So I'll be spending some more time in those and posting those in December. Crosstrek actually maybe end up being early January. We'll see. But so I'm going to have those two there for those who are interested. And so maybe you'll enjoy those, Shane. But stay tuned for that. But best of luck saving in the meantime. And Chad says, your thoughts on companies trying to do / keep something, but doing it wrong and misreading as customers don't want from poor sales, bad manual, poorly designed two-seater, et cetera. Well, I mean, yeah, I kind of, I guess, preemptively answer that question without knowing with the Charger. I think, Charger EV is a prime example of, trying to give customers what they thought they wanted, because the whole motivation for the EV version was performance made us do it. It's faster in a straight line. If you're sick of losing to the Teslas all the time, buy our EV instead. Unfortunately, Dodge fans weren't serious about performance in a straight line. They, they only care to a certain extent, but whenever it means losing the V8 sound, their priorities go out the window, and all of a sudden they don't care if they're slower than the electric one. But let me see here. ETA says doesn't have the screens, the cooled seats, the fridge to start, and the screens are nice. I mean, the fridge is a very rare thing most of the time. Like my box have that. I guess it's an option in some of the stuff, but I don't even, can you get it in like Lexus LS? I'm not sure if you can. And I mean, I think like A8 you can option it possibly, but it's a very rare option. I mean, I don't know, maybe you see more on the used market than I do, but like I think the fridge option is extremely rare, so it's kind of irrelevant to me because again, most people are never going to actually be able to get that in that segment when you're buying used. Cooled seats, there are some that do that. There's not a ton. I mean, again, like, the S classes I've been in the back of, they're not the highest trim versions, but I was just in an S class as a shuttle a couple of months ago and just had heated seats back there. Didn't have any crazy bells and whistles. So it depends on the trim. I guess you got to be lucky and find a very highly optioned one if you get all that stuff. But the average large executive sedan probably won't have that as standard. Maybe in the newest model years here, that's a thing. But pre-2020, I feel like there weren't a ton that had cooled seats. And the screens, again, like that's no loss to me because the screens were all garbage. Even some of the most newest screens are kind of iffy as far as those rear entertainment screens goes. And certainly 5 or 10 years ago, like you do not want to be bothered with that. That's for sure. They have not aged well. Let me see here. Vishal says, I love sedans with space. Every time I drive our Passat, I just love how spacious the interior is for a midsize. I think even now, only the Accord has caught up to it space-wise. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Accord was always, it was a really good back seat here because I mean even the prior generation, which is pretty similar in size because they're based on the same thing, had a really good back seat. I was very impressed with that back, when that last generation came out. And I'm trying to think of others that are really big. I mean, Malibu was pretty big, but it didn't utilize the space very well. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if there's any others that are bigger really. Yeah. And let me see here. Chad says he agrees the Sentra looks really great. I prefer it with body color bumpers, but each their own. I was hearing that there's several people now that have said that they prefer like the SL look over the SV. And I can certainly understand that. The whole blacked out thing is, definitely a big commitment. It kind of gives me like a Lexus vibe almost with, the spindle grille that people really, had a tough time being okay with for a while there. So I think that one might be more of an acquired taste, but I think the SL does look very nice for sure. And I'm all about luxury, so I'd probably go for that one too. If I was in the market and had that kind of money to spend on something like that. And ETA says, yeah, it was the '09 to like 11s that the Mustangs that had the glass roof. Nice. Okay. And Danny says, surprisingly, I saw recently a 2015 Volkswagen Passat SEL TDI. Someone got the emission system fixed, or did it escape the Dieselgate buyback? I mean, yeah, like you were able to keep those if you didn't want the buyback, which is a very generous buyback. So most just gave it up because it was financially beneficial for them. But if you really wanted to keep it, you could get the reflash, which apparently really sucked because it just hurt the performance pretty badly. But you could have taken it in, gotten the reflash done, and then, it was given the stamp of approval and you're sent on your way. So probably because I see diesels every once in a while from Volkswagen still around here. And I think it's just those people who really love their car, did not want to give it up, didn't care about the money, and got the flash. And some people actually, I think there's aftermarket stuff where you can just get rid of the flash or flash to a different tune that will kind of restore that stuff, hopefully without the the cheating stuff. But as far as giving you that performance back, I think there's ways to do that. I don't know how legal it is or what, but yeah, you could have kept them, I believe. And let me see here. So Chad says that after seeing the SOAR, our team started talking about manuals. One of my managers offered to help teach them how to row the gears. I told them I could help as long as I don't have to shift with my left hand. Yeah. You can learn it though. I mean, I shifted with my left hand when I reviewed the R32 GTR that I did several years ago. It's a little bit of an adjustment, but like for me, I was kind of surprised how quickly I took to it and how it became pretty much second nature pretty quickly. So it helps that I'm a little bit ambidextrous. So if you're really not good with your left hand, then maybe there's, a little bit of extra challenge. But for me, like, I mean, it was a little bit of a learning period, but like it wasn't too bad. So don't let that discourage you. You might be better than you think. And let me see. Chad also says the cold flash caused a lot of us to get low tire pressure warnings. Jordan surprised me by filling mine before work. Nice. I was able to help 2 crew at work with our portable pump. Love that little thing. Nice. Yeah, that's very common. We got that here in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago where I was like, all right, we got to pump up the tires. And actually, I just had to put air in Beth's tires in the Lyric here a few days ago because they were a few PSI low too. So, yep, it's one of those things you got to do when it gets cold. And see, Danny says, random Volkswagen fact. When was the last time Volkswagen offered a VR6 in the Jetta? It was the 2002 to 2003 GLI. Nice. Yeah. I remember those. And it's crazy. I remember like the ads and like the print ads for that generation GLI back in the day. Because I remember seeing them in the road and tracks that I had and stuff. Good times. And also that tech guy 1995, thank you so much for the super chat. He says Mazda CX-5 or CX-50, who's the better choice? So generally short answer, I think CX-5 is the better value because it is slightly cheaper than CX-50. And the problem with CX-50 is that they didn't really increase interior space. It's basically the same as CX5, even though CX50 is bigger. All that extra size went to the longer nose in the front and styling stuff. But rear seat legroom is, I think, almost identical between the two. Cargo space, I think, I'm not exactly sure, so don't quote me on this, but I think cargo space is actually like a hair smaller in CX50. Definitely fact check me on that one to make sure. But you know, the bottom line is there's no real gains there. You get, the slightly newer interior, and the interior is nicer for sure. That, the new generation here Mazda interior, certainly nicer, and you have more options. CX50 gives you the hybrid, you get the Meridian edition, which is a little bit more rugged and off-road ready and stuff. So there's, some other things that, where they've invested in CX50 and they haven't in CX5. Also, if you're shopping new, depending on when you're planning on buying, you might have some real leverage here next year as the next gen CX5 comes online, where dealers might be, hurrying to get rid of some of their inventory. Again, that's another issue where every dealer is different. Some dealers will say, "Oh, people are going to hate this new one. We're going to, treat these old ones like they're, valuable things that they can sell at a solid price still." But some others, typically dealers want to get the old stuff off the lot. So if you can wait, I think that might help you next year. If you're going to buy before then, yeah, it just comes down to those subjective things. And I mean, the pricing isn't that far off, so it's, and there's the newer structure and stuff like that too with CX50. So if it were me, depending on the price gap, if the price gap is fairly, insignificant, then I go CX50. It is the nicer car of the two. The stitching on the dash, all that kind of stuff. But if you are a value shopper, and especially if you're on the used market, because they depreciate pretty good, which is great because you can pick up a lightly used one for, mid to low 20s with like even a slightly higher trim, and you still get a really nice car. So yeah, and also CX50, I didn't love that it had pretty heavy steering in the first year or two. Supposedly, I think the 2025 model year they fixed that, made it lighter. I haven't tried one since they made that change, but that was the one thing I didn't really like about CX50. It's like an arm workout steering those things. So hopefully, if you're shopping new, then I would recommend making sure you get it 2025 so you get that change. I think you can maybe bring your old one into the dealer and have them do a reflash to that to lighten up the steering there. But yeah, they're both great. And definitely check out my reviews on both of them. I just revisited the CX5. I believe that was early this year, or was that last year? It's all a blur. But not too long ago, I did a CX5 turbo. Still, it holds up. Definitely check out the video again for that. But I also reviewed, CX50 hybrid. I did the regular CX50 turbo. And they're very nice too. So check out all that for all my thoughts, but hopefully it helps you a little bit there. And thank you so much for the super chat. All right, so I think we got a last couple of questions here, and then we'll be right at the hour mark. So let me see. Linda says that their moms wanted something cooler. Our moms wanted something cooler than a minivan, so they switched to SUVs. Yeah, there's definitely some of that too. And just, there's a variety of reasons why people are switching to SUVs and trucks. People, especially ever since, the COVID stuff, people really wanted to get out into the outdoors and really got hooked on that. And, people really like going on adventures or pretending, or just the idea that they could go on an adventure someday. It's an aspirational kind of thing, which is, the case for a lot of stuff. You buy things that are over engineered or whatever, because I can do this or that. And, you don't actually ever do those things, but it's just nice to know you can. There's a lot of that here, especially in America, in our culture. So I think that there's, that driving it as well. Again, I think that a lot of people also seeing more extreme weather around them want to have a more capable vehicle, and also just seeing all the bigger cars out on the road makes people say, "Oh, well, I want to be in a bigger car too, because I'll feel safer." So it's a safety thing. It's, safety from weather. It's Again, the aspirational adventure stuff. So I mean, and those are all very powerful motivators, whether it's a fear thing or it's a fun thing. I mean, cars are emotional purchases, and when you're getting more emotion from the SUV and the truck side than you maybe are from the sedan side, where they're perfectly fine, but they don't stir any inspiration in you to go out into the unknown and hike the wilderness or whatever. um you know it's just you don't get any of that. So unless you're an enthusiast that enjoys like the performance thing, which you really don't even get with the most of the sedans these days either, especially in the mid-sized class, um, there's not as much emotional pull there, I think. And I think that is an area where I think sedans can do a lot better to improve the appeal. I mean, there's some, especially when we go to the smaller stuff like Civic Si and things like that, where you do have some of that appeal. But I think there's still some improvements that could be made there for sure. And Jordan, thank you so much. He says, last one. Thank you for the super chat there, Jordan. He says, any update on the Tesla semis? I don't know. I haven't heard any updates on that. I can't imagine they're selling very many because I don't know about you guys, but I have not seen a single Tesla semi on the road. Because I mean, they sold them to like Pepsi and a few others, or they actually did deliver some of them, I think. Maybe they've since recalled them or something. I don't know, but I thought that they delivered stuff. Not a lot, but they had started that ball, but then it's like that all dried up. And again, I'm sure that now, especially with Elon being crazy and stuff, there might be some companies that dropped out in the past year and stuff. So I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything recently though, which probably suggests it's not doing very well, but I don't know. I haven't looked at the sales numbers to see. And I don't know if they actually provide that data, but anecdotally, I have not seen a single one, even with all my travels to, Texas, West Coast, places like that, where you should see them. Still have never seen one. I'm curious if you guys have ever actually seen one, because I certainly haven't. Thank you again, Jordan, for the super chat. And all right, let me see here. Vishal says he thinks Volkswagen has mostly cleared out the TDI cars, either crushing them or fixing the ones that could be bought up or brought up to compliance standards. Nice. Okay. And I see Vishal saying the same thing I did pretty much there with the emissions fix. And Chad says Volkswagen should bring back the rabbit name, if for no other reason than I like the name and the logo. Yeah, it was fun. But that's a car that just again doesn't sell here. It's just small stuff like that. They can't justify it. I'm amazed we still even have the GTI and the Golf R, honestly, especially the Golf R, because it's not big numbers, but they keep bringing it here, and so I'm happy they do. But yeah, it'd be fun, but I don't think Rabbit's happening anytime soon here. And Chad says, do you think there's a future for luxury travel custom vans or even off-road models with the EV skateboard design? I think that there is some, we'll have to see again how that segment evolves as far as like van life stuff, if that continues to be a thing or not, or if it continues to be more and more of a thing. But in Tokyo, like Lexus showed off what they think the future of the LS should be, which is basically a 6-wheeled minivan, like rolling, living room kind of thing. And I think that's probably pretty accurate. So I do think that vans have a bright future, because especially, you have to think about vans in a world where, again, things are, slowly going the autonomous route. And, I mean, not like minivans were ever enthusiast vehicles, but a vehicle where it really is all about your adventures with your family. And, if you can just have, a living room there, a giant space where you can just hang out and do stuff and be comfortable, then, it can be potentially more luxurious than being confined to a sedan that has a lot of leg room, but otherwise you can't get up, you can't do anything. I think there could be some potential for that. Even things like, hyper luxurious RVs, things I could even see, OEMs dabbling in that someday, depending on how far we want to take this, this theory and this, train of thought. But, I think that there's definitely a future for luxury vans. We're already seeing it in China. There's a bunch of luxury vans in China. There's a bunch in Japan. And I think that you'll see more, like Volvo's got a electric van in China. I think maybe in Japan too, but and there's others that Mercedes is dabbling with that idea with their concepts and stuff. So I think there's some smoke there, and that means there's some fire starting up as far as that um, appeal, and I think that could be one of the next big trends here in the 2030s for sure. And let me see here. Lancelot, thanks for stopping by too, and I hope you're doing well. And Jordan says, if Ford reads the comments, bring back Fusion with top tier hybrid tech and Focus EV/hybrid. Yeah, I'd love to see all that too. And Vishal says, still a shame they got rid of the Passat. I would have bought a new one if it was still around. Yeah, they really fumbled that for sure. And Chad says, I keep going through crash test videos and wondering if you've ever been surprised, good or bad, from a crash test or safety ratings. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while there's something where it does disappoint. A lot of times it really just comes down to how the airbags deploy, how well the seat belts do their job, where it's like, wow, I thought that would do better. Especially there was a couple in the past year or so here that did have the pretensioners and load limiters in the back seat, but still did bad on the crash test. And I was like, how do you screw that up? Like, there must be something with the seatbelt placement that's just really bad that caused that to still get a poor rating. I can't remember what it was, but that's one of the biggest surprises for me is when it is a new car and they have done all this stuff and it still ends up being underwhelming. And chat says, seeing your walkthroughs, I look forward to the future. Imagine seeing a clean body of a classic and dropping it on an EV sled and cruising. Yeah, that's an idea that I think will hopefully become more commonplace in the future. Again, as long as the electronics can be made to interact with each other seamlessly and the technology gets there to make that easy for regular people to do, to be able to, essentially plug into that battery pack, use it intelligently, and have software that runs it so that you can, do all that. Hopefully, that's something that pops up here soon. And Louise, thanks for stopping by. Says, Matt, good to see you, man. I used to watch you a lot a few years back. Hope life's well for you, buddy. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, the channel is definitely not doing great, and I'm working hard to improve it. I'm doing the junkyard video and also writing for Car Buzz now to supplement the income because it's been hands down the worst year of my YouTube career. By a long shot. Lots of fun experiences. So I'm very grateful for all the fun things I've been able to do. But from a view standpoint, from an earning standpoint, hands down the absolute worst since I was full time in 2015. So hopefully I turn things around. But I may not be doing this much longer if things don't improve, because I can't afford to live off of the amount that YouTube's been paying me this year. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to keep on trying my hardest because I love what I do still. I don't want to stop. And so I'm hoping that things improve. But probably more than you asked for, Louie, but I'm always honest and open. And so I can't say things are great because they aren't. But Chad says, glad you had safe travels and we're able to do this chat. We look forward to them. And I literally speed home when possible to be here live with you in the community that you've built. Well, thanks so much, Chad. Definitely, keep it safe, of course. No reason to speed to hang out and catch these. We'll always be here. And the beauty of these is you can always watch them back, after the fact if you do happen to miss. But thanks so much for stopping by. And yes, I'm glad that my flights today worked out so that I was able to get home in time and I didn't have any. I actually had no flight delays. So I was expecting the worst this week, but all of my flights were completely uneventful. I got very lucky because my one flight that I took here today, because I did two flights. The first one, my flight was fine, but the following two, because I connected in Atlanta, the following two that were connecting in Atlanta, the same basic flight, just two later time slots, both of those got completely canceled. So I was on the lucky one out of the three that didn't get screwed up. So I think I just got really lucky, but thankfully it worked out all good for me here this week. And Vishal says, Tesla delivered a small number of semis in December of 2022. Other than that, I haven't heard anything else. Crazy. I'm wondering if those trucks are still on the road though, and if they are racking up miles or what's going on with that. It's interesting. Thanks for the little info there, Vishal. And Chad says, I see them in China for luxury. Surprisingly for me, Japan likes off-roaders, so the cards are there. Yeah, which is kind of funny for Japan, but yeah, absolutely. I think there's some future, and we're even seeing, like Genesis at the New York Auto Show showed off like their luxurious concept of this very adventure ready EV that is also a Genesis, and just kind of you're seeing this a lot with companies kind of experimenting with that whole idea. Cadillac has experimented with it as well with their one concept. So I think that is a trend again when these companies are working on stuff 5 years into the future or more. I think that's a very safe trend. If you're seeing everyone else also putting out concepts and experimenting with that idea, I think that's a pretty safe thing to bank on. Is in 2030 ish, you can probably expect a bunch of luxury SUVs that they see the success of all the off-road stuff in the mainstream brands, and they say, okay, well, let's do that for the luxury brands as well. Obviously, Range Rover has been doing that for a long time, but I think these companies take it even one step further with the all-terrain tires and things like that. And I think that is a trend you'll absolutely see materialize in production vehicles, most likely here in the next few years. And Chad says, thanks for doing the live, Matt. We know you've been around the world, but still made the time. Absolutely. Always fun to hang out with you guys. And Jordan says, thanks as well. And we'll see you, Matt Heads, on Sunday. And Jordan says, it's not you, Matt, as far as the channel is the economy of this administration. Yeah, there's that. I mean, the tariffs definitely just knocked everything down immediately as far as ad revenue, companies pulling back their advertising. But it's also just AI stuff is just really eating into the views. So we'll see how it goes. But Chad says, as long as you show up, you have very loyal fans. And that's true. And I'm very thankful for that. I just... unfortunately, again, it's just about the numbers and needing more of that, to actually be sustainable. So we'll see, and be sure to share the word if anyone is interested in car videos. That always helps too with word of mouth. But anyway, Zachary says, go get some rest, Matt. I appreciate that. Yeah, I have been up since when did I wake up this morning? 5:30. Not terrible, but yeah, definitely a little tired there. So appreciate it, Zachary. Thanks for stopping by too, by the way. And Mr. 705 says, see you Sunday. Sounds good. And yeah, stay tuned. Again, I'm going to have a very fun video on Charger's 6-pack here on Friday morning. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this video is turning out and shaping up. And I'm curious to see the engagement and see what you guys think about the car and my thoughts on the car and all that. But yeah, obviously can't talk about that much more because I'm under embargo. But anyway, thank you all so much again. See you guys here on Sunday for the next live. And yeah, be sure to check out the review here on Friday. So take care. Have a great rest of your week. And yeah, stay safe, happy, and healthy. Take care.